Alrighty, g'day guys, welcome to the comprehensive placement guide for tier 4s. Now, just very quickly, this is actually going to be a lot quicker than the other videos because there are not very many playable tier 4s. Most of them are like support style units or auras, things like that, where you only really build one of them, and some of them are just like not so good in general. But regardless, we'll go through them, we'll talk about, especially for like the good units, we'll talk about the placement of them, even if you're only building one of them in any given setup, and yeah, stick around, enjoy. Okay, just quickly, because I just found this out, I actually want to show you guys a hilarious little janky thing with debug. So if I click over here, look, he doesn't want to go. He turns back. And he'll run all the way down to go and meet the king. So we take him back up over there. Nope. Nope, and you have to like fight through it. Anyway, I thought that was fucking hilarious, and that's with the that command there, the build all command, which stops the like region teleport. But yeah, I just thought that was funny. Alright, to start with, we're going to take one of the only tier 4 units that are actually considered playable, so it's the prisoner. The old school way of like playing prisoner, which is double prisoner on 1 and then demand that your team sends on level 2 for the third prisoner, that's pretty much gone. You really don't see that anymore. So what you see now is you see generally double Maverick on level 5, which means that one Maverick comes either level 2 or level 3 most of the time, right? Sometimes there's some like mix and risk shenanigans that go on, but that's the most common. So if you're going Maverick level 2, it means you're going one prisoner on level 1. I would say I would only do this with exec or infantry. Otherwise, I just wouldn't. So yeah, exec or infantry, I'm okay with doing the Maverick on 2, but most of the time just wouldn't. So your general setup is going to be 2 prisoners just next to each other. You add something for level 2, and 3-0 ideally. I think the best way to do it is to risk 3. To risk 2 a little bit and be 3-0. Maverick on 3. Maverick's really good on 4, so that's no worries. Maverick on 5. Maverick is honestly more consistent on level 5 than it is on level 6. And you can see this is 670 value, right? So you really don't want to have too much of a build here. Ideally, if you got like 50, 60 gold then of ad, then that's perfect. But yeah, it's pretty expensive. Which is why it's not such a great YOLO, but it's okay. Then Maverick's pretty good on 8, so if you haven't got like good ads or whatever, it's totally fine to just pick up a third Maverick on 8. Third Maverick on 8 sort of thing, and you're just totally building them in lines. The illusion ability here is a little bit RNG. Optimally, the real Maverick, which takes the normal amount of damage and deals normal amount, ends up like high on the wall, where there's only like a small surround. That's what you really want to see, but you can't control that, so you just build purely for damage share, and then whatever happens with the split is going to happen, because there's, as far as I'm aware, there's no way to control that, or there's no way to manipulate that with placement, besides like if you build one Maverick here and then like one Maverick up here, then like yeah, both of these, the image and the real one, are going to die before these. What a surprise, that sort of thing. Anyway, yeah, not much to say about it, but general setup is going to be double prisoner 1, a small add on 2, Maverick on 3, Maverick on 5, and then just like pushing as much as you can in that period. That's a standard setup, but you can do things with different adds. Like you can go one Maverick only if you've got like something that's pretty good on 5 and 6, maybe like a polar after a drop on level 1 or something. I don't know. But yeah, that's prisoner, so yeah, cheers. Alright, next up we've got the Mudman. So Mudman's not a bad YOLO early on. It obviously like struggles really hard on 5, so you got to be careful there. So you got 2 ways to build level 1. You can do 1-0 double Mudman. Don't really like this personally, so I generally try and do Mudman and an ad. Ideally, if you remember my synergy guide, which I made quite a while ago now actually, but I did like a Mudman Raider to show you like increment, damage increment assistance. So if you've got a unit that's like that, that's pretty good, it's just going to help increments on level 4, where the Mudman stops one-shotting, then that'll help. So you might do something like this into a second Mudman, 2, third Mudman on 3, and then just something else on 5, right? Basically, things to remember with this unit, Mudman's really good 1 to 3. It's not so good on 4. Like, it's okay, but like this is leak huge, and this is overbuild on 4, so you want to find that. That's where you want to find that increment add, right? You know, yeah, it's like an okay YOLO, but you really need to be mixing something for 5. I would say if you're building more than 2 Mudman, then you're probably going to have a hard time not being overbuilt on level 5. Yeah, that's just kind of how it is, because even at that point, if you've got Magnetor or something, you're on 690 value, and that's just no good for a YOLO, especially with dead value, so. But yeah, that's pretty much Mudman. So TO2, it's worth saying TO2 is the exact same, except it's better to start double TO2 1-0 on level 1 than it is Mudman. The reason for that is because you can do, just pretend these are TOTs to save me having to change the race. What you can do with TOT is that on level 1 to level 3, 520, holds level 4, and then upgrade level 5, right? Like, this is pretty overbuilt, but you can do it and it's okay. Or if you have something to mix, right, then you can do the same placement. And like TOT plus add level 1, and then TOT 2, 3, and then upgrade at level 5. You can do something like that, right? Because the TOT, obviously, it has medium armor, which is not bad level 5, as opposed to heavy armor, which is bad level 5, right? And I suppose just to show it off, we can do this positioning with Mudman as well. But the reason why it's like better to do that with TOT is because with the TOT you've actually got like a reasonable chance of just recovering on 8. Like you hold 5 and you recover on 8. Like this is going to hold 5 as well most likely, right? But it's just 700 value on 5 for a setup that's going to die level 8. It doesn't feel good. But you can see in general this is like the placement you want, right? Where the golem is your primary tank, because Mudman actually has a good increment on 5, right? Like, it's not as bad on 5 as most people think, but it's just really squishy, so that's like the problem with it. But I mean, as you can see right there, it is YOLOable, but it's just not good. It's just really not good. I haven't had to do Mudman YOLO in a very, very long time. But you know, it's nice to know the strengths of this unit, right? And it's also nice to know that it's a 2-hit on 5. So if you mix it with something like Veteran, for example, I mean, there's some upside to that because they have the same increment on 5, just as an example. But the main problem with this is it dies on 8, and that's where TOT is kind of better, even though TOT is like just generally stats-wise is a little bit worse. The medium armor and the move speed really helps it on well, the medium armor helps it on level 5, and the medium armor and the move speed really helps it on level 8. Because there's just, with this setup, like, I don't even know what you'd have to be holding 8 with 7-3, like, it just feels not so doable. But anyway, you know, it's an option to get some early push in, but it's hard to not call this a suicide roll. It's full dead value and fully dying on 8. But you know, you do what you can, and if you have to play it, you have to play it. This little half spot is quite important though, to make the golem tank, because if you look at the HP, 735, 1580. So golem has way more HP, right? And on these early levels like 5, 6, it's too much HP to get sniped, right? To get quote unquote sniped when you're mixing it with other melee units, right? Like if we deleted these and just had ranged units, then yeah, it'll get sniped when it walks off the wall, right? But with other melee units, to share some damage, we can let the golem be a bit more of a primary tank. So we'll just show that one more time. In terms of the aggro and what this half spot does. So because the golem's further in front, it'll take the aggro of like more creeps than normal, right? And that's great for us, right? It'll take all these wraparound creeps. And that's absolutely perfect because it's got more than double the health of all the Mudman, so I'm totally fine with it tanking more. Yeah. It didn't really happen so much on this one, but what you don't want is your 3 Mudman getting killed, or 3 mudmen getting killed, and your golem being left alive as the only unit on like 3/4 HP, and it's like, oh, because it's DPS, while not bad, is kind of slow on level 5. Yeah, that's about it. Literally placement is identical for TOT. You're just going full on for damage share, and then the one that's going to get upgraded is a little bit more in front, as to just in order to tank a bit more damage when it gets more HP. And with the upgraded TOT has the benefit of being the wall clog from the slower on the wall. But yeah, that'll do it for TOT Mudman, and yeah, cheers. Next one. Alrighty, next up we've got Mr. Tempest. Bit of an awkward one, this unit, but like, it's actually a really solid unit, and then you get to level 5 and it's fucking awful. So it's something you need to mix, but you can play it through the early game and have some success. So level 1, I mean, the way I would do it, honestly, is just 4 risk, 1 Tempest level 1. Does hold, no send always. They send warrior, and you can honestly just, go for a run or something, because your game's a bit over. So if you want, you can play a bit safer, but I would prioritize getting 3-0, right? And then banking a bit of gold for a second Tempest level 2, right? And you might be thinking, oh, why don't you add a tier 1? Why do we not add a tier 1? The reason we don't want to add a tier 1, or I think it's not worth adding a tier 1, is because if you're like playing Tempest, right? If you're starting Tempest like this, then I seriously doubt you've got the carry roll. At least if you're playing it this way, right? And what this will do is, if you get 4 gold before level 3, it'll allow you to get a 3rd Tempest, right? And still push 4-0. And the 4-0 is nice, right? It's interesting, at least in LoL, the meta has changed a little bit around the early game, where things like Night Saber have gone down quite a bit, because they're 2-0 for so long, right? Night Saber with no ads, you've got to be like 2-0 for level 3, and it's really painful. And we've seen a real rise in shit like Crusader, for example, to just get the really early 4-0 YOLO, right? Crusader, like cannons, are generally going 4-0 as early as they can. Like these really high push starts, which play quite risky, particularly like level 2 and 3, play quite risky, and then just have that strong early push to give the team the best options, right? The carry rolls are still playing like what was standard for a long time, like generally just 2-0 for a while, right? The carry rolls are still doing that. I've been seeing less sends on 2 and 3 in general. So still you see a bit of 3, but 2 is uncommon now. So yeah, you see these 4-0 pushes like quite a lot, at least in LoL, which I think is a really cool meta shift. Anyway, rambling a bit, but this setup lets you get with 4 gold before level 3, which I mean is relatively common. It lets you get that 4-0, which is pretty nice, honestly. So 1 Tempest level 1, 2nd Tempest level 2, 3rd Tempest level 3. This also holds level 4, and then level 5, it's like, it's hard, right? So I'd say if you actually want to hold level 5 and your role lets you do that, I think you don't build the 3rd Tempest, you build something else. So if I had this role, right, if I was just straight up playing this role and I decided not to play Veteran for some reason, I wanted to play Tempest, then I might do something like 3 of these, right, for level 3, and then just maybe, I don't know, another infantry in front for the pool, and then like a captain for level 5, right? That would still get me the early 3-0, at least, right? And then I play it a bit differently. I go Tempest plus infantry level 1 to infantry level 2, Tempest level 3. We might do something like this on level 5, right? To use the infantry to share damage at the front, and then the captain to run forward, so it still has uptime on its aura, but it shares damage. And we use the strength of the infantry on level 5, or at least the relative strength of the infantry to level 5, to do pretty well with 630. Looks like we're going to leak a little bit, but I can tell you with like 700 pure Tempest, you're leaking half the wave, and with 685 Leviathan, you're leaking 6 or 7 creeps and dying on 8. We might do something like that. and then, you know, play level 6, and then we try and use like the strength of the Tempest to help us through level 6, right? Because Tempest is really legit on level 6, right? This unit's really, really good on level 6. Actually, that reminds me, there's a cool little setup you can do with Clockwork, actually, which is quite fun with Tempest. I guess I might show that to you guys, because that's the only time that I've used Tempest recently in the early game, and been happy with it. But yeah, placement-wise, they've got 600 HP and they walk forwards before they attack, so you do actually want to use them to share some damage. So if I was playing like a Suicide YOLO Tempest on this roll with a different tier 1, with like an unplayable tier 1, then I honestly might play something like this, right? See how like a few creeps on 5, and looks like I'm holding 6, or leaking a couple of creeps, it's close. Yeah, managed to hold 6, and as I said, 6 in debug is like kind of cracked. But I had pretty alright aggro here, so it's fine. Yeah, I might do something like this, for example, with this roll, right? And that at least lets me play a 630 value 5/6 YOLO, which is acceptable. It's not great, but considering I have okay early push, then it's like fine, right? Anyway, in terms of Tempest, positioning, 600 HP, so it's pretty reasonable early on. Short range, but moves before they attack. So you want to use them to just share damage, right? With other Tempests, you're looking to share damage, and with like melee units, you really want to get that range melee damage share going on. You could do, now, hope you've watched my like placement, you know, like comprehensive guide, or placement text or whatever I ended up calling it, I forget off the top of my head. Hope you've watched that, because you might end up doing a range melee damage share early into a tier 1 aggro rotation on level 5. You could do something like that with Tempest, and it's pretty legit, because these things are paper level 5, right? They're pretty tanky like every other level until level 8, but on level 5 they're really, really squishy. So I'd say that might be quite a good way to do it, is do a range melee damage share with Tempest in front for the first 4 levels, and then do a tier 1 aggro rotation, if you're mixing it with a melee unit. Like, I don't know, Polar, for example, in your first roll or something. Could be cool. Anyway, I'm not going to show you the full setup for this one, but what we can do is a standard Clockwork start into back to mech, first page, there we go. So standard Clockwork start, clock, level 3, risk or not, up to you. But you can go like Tempest, and then I actually like a Tempest here to start some damage share. And we can just check this out, right? Clocks, obviously terrible on 6, but if you got double Tempest with your clocks, it's a good time. 620, it's a 620 5/6 YOLO. Which, you know, is not bad for clock, right? Like, yeah, Tempest is kind of bad level 5, but clock's really good level 5. So you use Clockwork to get the strength of, or you use Clockwork to cover the weakness of the Tempest on 5. And use Tempest to cover the weakness of the Clockwork on 6, right? So you can see like the golems are cracked here. And I'm not sure my placement was the best. Just out of curiosity, I wonder if I would do better if I did displacement. I believe when I did it a long time ago, I did the second Tempest here and it held both levels like easily. But I just want to have a look at this to see if I like the look of it more, potentially. But yeah, general rule is like Tempest really, really good on 6. And then like pretty good on every other early level, and then just like absolutely awful 5 and 8, right? So 5 and 8 are the levels to be really careful of. Seems like this might just be better placement, looking at it. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be easy hold like this. Okay, don't do that first placement I showed. I was maybe getting too clever for my own good there. But either way, 620 holding 5 and 6 is really nice. But yeah, those are like a couple of applications of Tempest. I would say with Clock you don't really need to damage share, because Clock is just like so tanky early on that I think it's not really worth doing that. And with only 2 Clocks, creeps on melee levels will wrap around and hit the Tempests eventually anyways. And if you build these to damage share, they're going to suicide on 8. which you don't really want, right? Because they still do some damage on level 8, even though they're not good. But they also die in very, very short amount of time if you put them in front. So yeah, that'll do it for Tempest, and yeah, cheers. On to the next. Alrighty, next unit we're going to talk about is the flying machine / helicopter. So if there's a YOLO of purely these units, I've never seen anyone do it. I wouldn't want to do it myself. I mean, honestly, you probably just play it exactly like that Mudman TOT, because they're the same identical value. That honestly seems like it wouldn't be the worst, but we don't need to talk about that. If there's a way to play this unit, it's identical to the Mudman TOT setup, except for the fact that you don't need increment help on level 4, but you're way worse on level 3, so you're stuck 2-0, and you're like forced to go 520 copter on 3, otherwise you're just super fucked. Anyway, I'm going to talk about this unit on level, or where to place it specifically. So if we just have a look at it, it's got medium armor, 600 HP, and then we're going to look at how it behaves before it attacks, right? Because this is always important to know, if you know which units will move and which units will stay. So we watch Copter, it moves a little bit before it attacks, right? So that's important with placement. Cool. So, as I said, 600 HP, medium armor. We don't really want it to full tank on 3, or we don't want it to take much damage on level 3 if we build it there. We do want it to tank on level 5. So we might do something like, I'm seeing if there's a good setup. Yeah, sure, we'll do Clockwork. It's like a convenient one. Right? So we might do clock, right? Then we might do just a flying machine in front. And remember, we just checked, it moves a little bit before it attacks, right? And that's really important to know. Then do a turret. Yeah, 560. It's honestly like a little overbuildy. We'll just take a decent tier 1, let's say Spectre. You know I love my Spectres, so. So, we can do something like this. We actually start the level, right? Whoa, I don't know. Wow, okay. Yeah. Okay, cool. Let's not fight level 5 and level 6 at the same time. Alright, level 5 is starting, and only level 5. So, because we tested it, we know that the Copter likes to walk, so we don't need that half spot like we need with Wyvern, right? We need the half spot with Wyvern because Wyvern doesn't walk before it attacks. You see here, the Copter's even tanking a little bit too much, but it's way better that it tanks some and shares than just sits in the back doing absolutely nothing, right? And we might go on and test a few alternative placements here. So another placement idea would be to just move one of these Spectres to in front of the Copter here. Which is going to give us some Warpool early, which is still relevant early. It's best on level 10, but it's still relevant early like this, right? And then that'll give a bit of a buffer for our Copter, and it should make the clocks walk in front a little bit more. So the clocks will be sharing more evenly, and the Copter will be safer. The Copter appears to be a little bit too safe, but it's starting to tank now, which is what we want, basically. So that's like one idea you could do of a placement, so it's like an aggro rotation. And get the damage share on 4 like that, and then aggro rotation on 5. So you can see that like works okay. Another placement option would be like a flank tank, where you can, God, I didn't have Copter anymore, where you can do something like this with your Copter, right? And what it's going to do here, because we know that it walks forwards before it attacks, and the clocks obviously walk a bit because they're melee, it's going to sit approximately in line with where the clocks are now. And then the creeps that start to flank around, it's going to tank those, right? So you can see it's starting to tank a few creeps already. It's a little bit lazier than you'd maybe have it ideally, but it takes 100 damage and it's not too bad, right? Maybe a full spot was even too much, might even be better with a half spot only. Because that was going to leak like that. So maybe we're better with just like that. I got a little unlucky with the clock positioning on that last one where they position vertically. You want them to stay horizontal because then the flanks happen a bit more nicely. Like this is better. You'll see these creeps will start to spill out of the clocks, and then they'll find the flying machine. You can see it's tanking a little more already on this one than it is on last one, and we have better damage share on the clocks. So this one's going to be a hold, right? And I mean, this is obviously like pretty low value. A hold, 545. This is like maybe 7-2 if you had a good game, right? And you see it's a big difference, so it's kind of some experimentation, but I'm inclined to say that this is the best sort of placement. And we'll just show you the, like, I guess the quote-unquote classic placement here. Where you're not trying to get the clock sharing at all, the flying sharing at all. You're just like, oh yeah, it's a ranged unit and it goes behind the melee unit, which is, you know, not wrong per se, but I would argue that it's like slightly flawed because the flying machine is probably going to share very little damage here, even though it's actually going, it is going alright. I think the main thing is as long as the clocks share, you're probably just fine with this setup though. And if the clocks have bad aggro, then you can leak. And how do you fix that? You kind of can't. It's just gonna be a little bit RNG, right? But I don't know. I still have a lot of faith in this just clock front. I'm rambling heaps, I know. I'm gonna probably cut this segment down. I think it's interesting though. Just to watch a bunch of the damage shares and how the units work. But you can see with this one, the clock just tanks too much, right? Or the flying just tanks too much. This would be good if it was a helicopter, but it doesn't need to be a helicopter, right? That's just overbuild. Helicopter obviously having, I believe 1200 health rather than 600. You can see with good aggro we can still hold like this, mostly because Spectre's like quite good. But there's no need to get our flying fully sniped like that. So this placement's just incorrect straight up. But we do want to make sure it tanks. So it could, how about even same line? Same line's kind of an interesting one. I'd say it's probably a little bit far forward. Would be my like general thought about it, but it could work. It looks like we're going to have the same problem as clock in front. It's not quite as egregious because this clock is starting to tank, but you can see we've got that vertical aggro again, which is not really what we like. We do like the Spectre sharing, we don't like the Spectre dying. See, clock is just kind of a broken unit on 5. It's really good, hey? But I don't know, there are a lot of placements you can do. I'll kick this one right down, just to make sure you don't sit through 20 minutes of crap. But yeah, I think you get the idea with that damage share that you want from the flying machine. I guess the other one would be something like level 8, where we can just show that now actually. We'll do that half spot because I like this placement the most. And then you might do, let's just say you're going like full yellow 7-4. You got on 7-4, you got 885 value, that's legit. And then you need this helicopter to share down, to share some damage, right? Because helicopter's pretty good on 8. It's a 2-shot, which is obviously good, right? But you need it to be tanking a little bit of damage. It doesn't have to tank tons. But you can see this is like kind of not enough here, just realistically. It's kind of not. But at least it's some. And the nice thing about the helicopter here is that it's once a couple of the clocks die, it'll start tanking on the flank a little bit. See, it's tanking at least some of these creeps. But yeah, it's not really enough. So we might actually go back to the placement we had that one time. Where the Spectre, yeah, the Spectre suicides. But what if we do it like this? And it just... Hey, this is a landmine, not a Spectre. Whoops. Well, we'll keep it as a Spectre just for the sake of the test, I guess. We can do something like this, for example. And obviously this Spectre is going to get thrown to the dogs, so I'd actually prefer it wasn't here, but if it was here on 5, then it's here. And you can see this helicopter is going to tank quite a bit more this time, and this is more like what we want. So maybe that aggro rotation placement is actually the best for a full YOLO, taking into account level 8. Because you can see this time the helicopter took about 400 damage before the clock started fully tanking. And now it's going to take a little bit more on the side. And that's really good, right? That's what we want. We need this helicopter working, otherwise we leak really hard, right? But if the helicopter tanks, then we actually don't leak that much, even though we don't have particularly impressive value. Yeah, I mean at this point you should have a pretty good idea of what you want. You're just trying to get it to damage share, but it's a little bit of a finicky unit to do that with. But anyway, yeah, hope you enjoyed, and stick around for the next one. Alrighty, next up we've got the little Polar. This is actually a bit of a finicky unit, right? Like, it's a really cool unit, but holy crap, is it annoying to build early game. And the reasoning for that is Polar has like melee range. I believe it's like not 80 or 90 range by default. Moves quickly, moves fairly fast before it attacks and like fairly far forwards, and has 600 HP. Then the Magnetor, which if you're going early Polar, a lot of the time you're going Magna on like 5. Whoops. Magnetor does not solo hold level 5, by the way. Shocking, I know. Sorry. Okay, a lot of the time you're going like Magna level 5, right? But the range changes to 180. And it moves more slowly, right? So it's actually really awkward to place. So what we want to be thinking about with the Polar is like, where can I build it early? Or like, how can I flex my build in such a way where I can get them, I can make sure the Magnetor is still like sharing damage, if not just tanking early. Or where the Polar is, yeah, where the Polar is early, so that when I upgrade it to a Magnetor, it'll still share damage or just tank like I want it to do. But the Polar won't like sprint in front and die on level 4, because Polar's a really bad unit on level 4, right? Like, it's really squishy. Just FYI, there is no like Polar YOLO. I mean, once again, it's one of those Mudman TOT ones, but you just don't do it. You just go early Magnetor. And like with just whatever adds, doesn't matter what adds really, just go early Magnetor and then springboard that through your YOLO. But yeah, like, it's obviously a super good unit, just the placement's a little bit finicky. So let's say we've got a Polar Pandaren set up, right? What I'm going to do is a placement that looks something like this, right? So I'm going to build this for level 1 with 3-0. I'm going to get this for level 2. And this for level 3. I actually am only 2-0, by the way, because I would do my maths beforehand. But obviously these units aren't the best on level 3, so I think just 2-0 is probably going to have to be how it is. So we'll test level 4, and you're going to see what this looks like. You can do the same thing with like Crusaders instead of Panda, for example, right? I just Panda because it saves me from having to repick. So we do something like this. And then, as we can see, the Pandas, because they're like pretty small, they'll move up and start tanking. The Polar is tanking like more than we want it to, but that's because of that half spot in front. But we'll show you why we need that. So Panda, Crusader, both good units on level 4. In the end, this Polar manages to survive and we get quite lucky. But we should be good to hold level 4 with this setup most of the time if we're scared. If we have like a good tier 1, we can add it and that's totally fine. For example. But here's the reason why we need this half gap, right? It's because of this level 5. So we'll just watch how it works out. Because obviously these pandas, they move fairly far. But you see the Magnetor with the half spot in front is going to tank, is going to be like our primary tank here, right? It'll start taking more damage as soon as these creeps actually walk around, right? See the double slow from Panda Magna is pretty brutal on these creeps. Unfortunately, Magnetor steals like low HP creeps. There's kind of not much you can do about that. At least with this build. But you can see this is a pretty easy hold because we get the Magnetor tanking. Right? But if we just did everything same line, we'll just show you this next level here. We'll show you level 5 still. So level 4 is going to be better with this positioning, just on average, right? But if we have a look at this with the Magna here, with its 180 range, and the Pandarans with their melee range, we can see what's going to happen most likely. So the Pandas run off, like pretty far, and you can see this Magnetor is not tanking much, and the Pandas are tanking most of the damage. Now in the end, they have really good damage share, so we're going to be totally fine. But I'm talking we're doing this setup with like Crusaders instead of Pandas, right? We might just show you Crusader because I guess it's a much more obvious example. Is Crusader an elf or paladin? Paladin's got EA, so let's say elf. Yep. So we'll do this setup for level 5. Wish there was a downgrade. So Panda actually stops before it casts, which makes this positioning like a little better on 5 for the Panda. And obviously they're tankier on 5. But we can show you this setup with the Crusaders here, for example, on level 5, right? You can see they walk forwards pretty far, and the Magnetor sits behind them because of this 180 range. We don't have good damage share on the Crusaders, and it's really painful, right? We lose our Crusaders pretty quickly. And this might just be too many creeps for the Magnetor to deal with, right? Because in the end it's pretty good on 5, but it doesn't have the best DPS. Looks like we're going to be okay this time. But, I mean, if the Magna is stealing more of the Crusaders' kills, we can easily leak. And this is not what you call a good hold, right? So what we do instead is we have the Crusaders a half spot behind, and we'll show you level 4 with Crusader as well. We do the half spot behind, right? And then we just watch the same thing. This time we actually get a little bit lucky with the spawn towards the right. That's better for us. The Magna moves early, and you can see that this Magnetor is going to be able to tank way more, right? The creeps will start to wrap around, and the Magna's going to be tanking earlier, right? So this Magnetor had taken basically no damage by this point last time. And now you can see the Magna sharing with the Crusaders, which is much nicer for us. Still going to be the last unit to die. There's not a lot we can do about that. So if we put the Crusaders further back, then we are just going to lose the Polar immediately on level 4 and Lake. And so we're happier with this placement with the Magnetor sharing, right? That's more important. Anyway, so repick. And just to demonstrate level 4 once again, right? Obviously, Crusaders being worse units than Panda. Not by a lot, to be honest, on level 4, but by a little bit. Say they're taking 80%, whereas the Pandas were taking 90%, but still. See, like this, the Polar does end up like tanking fairly hard early, but the Crusaders move in front, start to share a little bit. And because they're generally quite good units on level 4, most of the time we'll be fine here. keeping in mind that with 3 melee units it is like fairly RNG on the focus. Like I'd say we've got good focus here, but it looks like we need pretty good focus to actually get the hold in, right? So this is not the most consistent, but it's only 430 with a polar, right? And you can see we don't actually get punished for that half spot most of the time, and if we have a good tier 1, Spectre, Acolyte, whatever, we can just add that and be safe, right? Then once again we get the Magnetor. Just show this like one more time just to reiterate. Because these Crusaders are a half spot behind, the Magnetor moves up, early tanks, and then the Crusaders move in front, right? And we need to get this Magnetor doing something, right? Because if it does nothing, then it's a bit rough. So obviously RNG in the sense that if the Crusaders hit the creeps near the Magnetor, it'll steal the kills. Like, see? Steal. But if they hit the creeps over here, then it won't steal the kills. But in general, like, the more you get the Magnetor sharing, even if it is stealing kills and essentially removing the DPS of the Crusaders, it's tanky as hell, and we want to make sure we use that to keep the Crusaders alive as long as possible to increase the overall DPS. Cool. And then obviously level 6 we have a Magnetor, we're happy, and then level 8 we just do whatever is appropriate for our role. But yeah, that would be like Polar. And I think this half spot is a really, really nice tech with Polar, just to make sure the Polar doesn't get fully fucked early on, but to still force that Magnetor to actually work later on. I guess one other thing you can do as well if you're scared of the Polar getting fully sniped is you can build a tier 1 like here. Normally the tier 1 in front is a really bad idea. Actually, how about we test that with the Polar, not the Magnetor, hey? Because the Magnetor makes life kind of easy. I know this is dragging on a little bit, but I think it's okay still. Okay, we build the tier 1 in front of the Polar, right? And what this is going to do is stop the Polar getting attacked immediately, right? Because obviously the tier 1's going to run up and die. And this will mean that when our units actually reach the wave, they're in a more even formation, which means we're going to have more damage share as opposed to like full snipe. You can see the Polar's tanking like a little bit more damage, but last time it got fully sniped, this time it didn't. So that's something you can do to like counteract the weakness of that half spot with the aggro rotation, but it's actually going to make it, keep in mind, it's going to make it worse again on level 5. So you better be happy to sell that tier 1. Again on level 5, right? And I guess I'll show you that once again. Far out. I didn't think this would go for quite so long, but yeah. As you can see, a bit better focus because the Polar stays alive longer. But now if we do it this way, and we leave the tier 1 here, so what's going to happen is the tier 1 runs forward, then the Magnetor runs forward. But because of that tier 1, you can see that both Crusaders end up completely in front of the Magnetor, and this is what we try and avoid, right? That's the whole point of having that half spot there in the first place, is for the Crusaders to not just run straight in front of the Magnetor like this. So, so that tier 1 can help you out for level 4. If you're going like full on damage share, like dead straight line, then I do not recommend a tier 1 in front on 4 like ever, because more often than not it will screw your focus. But with this half spot in front, you've already screwed your focus like deliberately, right? With the little half spot. So you can actually put the tier 1 in front to normalize the focus, right? But as we just saw, get rid of it. Get it off your lane for level 5, because that's when the range changes on the Polar. And that is honestly the biggest reason, like the biggest way in which people screw up Polar. Right? They place it badly. Either they place it too far in front, it runs forward, gets fully sniped on like every level, or they place it too far back or in line, and then when they upgrade it to a Magnetor, it stops sharing the damage, and then their lanes suck from that point. So that's the trick with Polar Magna, right? And I know I spent a while on this, but I think it's really important, because it's honestly like a pretty big noob trap, I guess, or, you know, anyone, honestly, not even noob chat, just anyone that's not really thinking about what exactly it is or how they're gonna drop the units down to actually normalize the polar. So this half spot, like, it's a really good tech. I've been using it way more than I used to when I was a weaker player, even like a year ago or so. So really think about it, it's a nice little trick to get your unit sharing a lot better. But anyway, yeah, cheers for watching. I know it was a long one, but I think it was a good one, and on to the next one. Alrighty, we're going to talk a little bit about Mermaid here. So this is obviously like not the actual build, because there isn't an actual build, right? This unit's pure support. But firstly, I just want to show you how the AI targeting on the spell works. And I think this is just like a good way to test it, right? We've got triple egg sac, one mermaid, nothing like out of the ordinary, and we're just going to see which one she casts on. For some reason I did that, sorry. I just wanted to... that one, clear and close. It's very confusing. At least for, you know, at least for me. You guys would probably be alright, but I struggle. So yeah, and we're going to have a watch. So this one got attacked first, and then this one got attacked. But this one ends up getting the spell. Basically what I'm trying to say is it's more or less complete RNG as to what the mermaid will actually use the shield on, right? It'll use it on something that's getting attacked, but who knows what, right? Like, seriously, who knows? So, but this unit has 500 HP and light armor, so you want it sharing damage. What the hell do you do? If you're playing it with something like Sea Giant, you want it to damage share a little bit. You also really want it to hit the Sea Giant. So what do? You build it somewhere like here, right? So, just to show on level 2, here's how your lane's going to look when you build it nice and close to the Sea Giant. Very important, right? Very, very important. So you can see, Sea Giant walks forward in front of the mermaid for long enough that the mermaid will use the shield on the Sea Giant. But as these creeps start to wrap around and around and around, you see the mermaid starts to damage share. So you actually want a late damage share with the mermaid, right? Because most of the time when you build this unit, right, unless you're either desperate or silly, you want to build this unit with something that's big, right? Like Ig, Sea Giant, sucks with Lord, for example, because it's 2 units, right? Things like Ig and Sea Giant, they like the shield from the mermaid, right? So you can see it shielded itself twice now when both units are getting attacked. RNG, but it is that first shield that really matters, right? So you want to make sure that first shield goes on your big unit, and then shields after that point don't matter as much, right? But the first shield on the big unit, and then the creeps wrap around, the mermaid starts to tank, right? And then second shield can be like whatever. And then obviously you might end up with a setup like this on level 7. The unfortunate thing with this setup is the Highborn will likely be a little bit lazy, not tank too much. But honestly, on something like level 7, that's not the worst. So let's give ourselves a send, for example, just to test. So verb, hermit. Might do something like that. 4 verbs, 4 herms, verb, hermit, dark troll, kobold, I believe the send should be, unless something goes weird. Yep, as it should be, cool. So you can see mermaid walks forwards, uses the spell, we'll use the shield soon. Shields itself because it's silly. That's a little bit unlucky there, but it is what it is. It's worth noting it does snipe kobold when you build it in front like this, which is a really nice thing. The hermit is dead, it sniped the kobold as well, so it's behaving really nicely. Now it might start to tank as soon as this Hydra dies, and it'll get a second spell off, right? So, building the mermaid in front, it's going to help you a lot like that. It will snipe sends on 7. Most of the time you're building this, you're not really going for a YOLO, because it tends to mean you have singular big units. Singular big units don't YOLO all that often. You can see Hermit, Kobold, Dark Troll, that's normally like a fucking death sentence for Hydra, but not this time. And the other nice thing about this unit is we're going to just ditch both of these. Right. the other nice thing about this unit, we're just going to have a look at the Storm Geyser, I believe the ability's called. We're just going to watch that. And it's worth noting this unit walks forward before it attacks as well. So you can see it summons the Geyser, and the Geyser will move to allied units. So because it's just the Highborn here, I think we actually dropped a creep, but whatever. The Geyser stays on top of the Highborn, right? If we just read the ability really quickly, summons a Storm Geyser, heals nearby friendly units 10 HP per second, and then shocks enemies for like a little bit of damage. It's like whatever. The damage doesn't really matter. And see, let's build this Hydra ridiculously far in front. And we're going to watch how this spell works. So, we got the Mermaid like really far behind here. I mean, it's more the Hydra's really far in front, but whatever. Mermaid's really far behind. You see it's going to like walk up, and it's going to use its spell, and the guy's just like, ugh! And it has a really hard time moving, and you're just like wasting uptime on this Geyser, right? What you want is instead of the Geyser having to move to your units, you want the Mermaid to be like, bang! Just drop it down at her feet, and it's like already done, right? You can see even with this positioning, second shield still goes on the Mermaid. They're not very smart units occasionally, but you know what, it's fine. So what we do instead of that placement is this one right here. Right, Mermaid directly behind. Obviously we'd place like more like here, just to give ourselves more space and options and that. You can see we summon the Geyser and oh, the Hydra's already getting healed. Perfect. This time it got the Frost Armor, which is what should happen most of the time. Like it really should happen most of the time. You see this Healing Aura is doing heaps. Hydra has the Frost Armor. Second Frost Armor on the Mermaid, we're totally fine with that because it's the second one, we don't care nearly as much. It's that first one that's really critical. You can see this is like good enough to freehold, right? Because the Geyser was right at the feet of the Mermaid. You see we're going to leak, what, 3 creeps here? Something like that. With a little bit unlucky Mermaid snipe. And what we'll do is we'll run the exact same setup. We'll do this instead. You know what else is worth saying? Mermaid, or Highborn, 500 range. Hydra 325, but going to be tanking, so essentially melee of the creeps. And watch this Geyser. It's over here. It's helping out the Hydra. This Highborn will not be getting any healing. It's not even going to share damage here, but it will not be getting any of that juicy healing aura, right? So you can see, it's not healing at all. These Hydras are healing, but the Mermaid's not healing, right? Because it's not close enough to the Geyser. So it's a unit with 930 HP. Give it 10 HP per second. Put it next to the units where you want the Geyser to be, right? Get it working on that as well. You may as well, there's like literally no downside. And you see, like massive difference, right? Between leaking like 3 creeps to leaking what? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like 9 or 10 creeps, right? It's literally just a placement gap right there. There's nothing different about the aggro. Completely just placement, right? So yeah, Mermaid, you want it, basically, you don't want it to tank initially because it'll waste the shield on itself. Because you're only building it with big units, so you want that first shield, got to go on your big important unit, right? First shield, big important unit. So Mermaid must be behind. But Mermaid, when it's upgraded, must also sit in the Healing Geyser, right? Mermaid must sit in the Healing Geyser, which means it needs to be close to your big unit. Right? So it'll go first shield, big unit. That's what you need. And Highborn in its own healing aura. So that means it needs to be nice and close. I'd say directly behind is the best placement, because when it's directly behind, it'll also share damage. Really nice early on. It won't take that initial hit and waste the shield. It'll still shield your big unit, but as the creeps start to wrap, it'll start sharing damage. Second shield it might use on itself, but at that point it's probably tanking enough to the point where the second shield on itself is like okay, even if it's not what you want, it's generally not the end of the world. So yeah, that'll do it for Mermaid Highborn. Ended up talking a bit more about this than I thought, but you see a lot of people screwing up the placement and doing this like placement with the Highborn right at the back, and it's really silly. It is like really, really, really silly. You want to get that thing in its own aura. and you want to get it sharing damage, because it's going to waste its shield anyway. I'm on the second one, as long as it gets the first one, it's perfect. Right, yeah, cheers for watching, and on to the next one. Alright, last tier 4 I'm going to talk about is the Young Witch Doctor. This is actually like a super good unit. And you can think of it honestly quite similarly to the Mermaid, right? So it's got 400 HP early on, but it's got a life regeneration rate of +5 aura. I'm going to just assume that means 5 HP per second. I don't exactly know, but I think that would be quite reasonable. Then you have the Big Witch Doc, 10 HP per second, I assume. Big one, generally not the best. Good in like late game, and maybe worth it if you have really tanky setups with like Butchers or Fire Overlords, Hydras, Tok, maybe that sort of shit. Otherwise the small one's generally just good enough. But yeah, so it's got 400 HP. So if you can get it using a little bit of HP early on, then that's going to be really helpful. Like if you're playing it with Warchief, for example, we'll show you two setups for a level 3 freehold. Hopefully freehold. Obviously Warchief RNG, but we'll make our point. Regardless of the Warchief RNG. So for this one, Warchief's going to walk forwards. Witch Doc's right behind it. You can see the Witch Doc's going to start tanking some creeps now. But it's going to be healing as well, right? And because it's healing, it has more than 400 HP, right? This Witch Doc probably already has like 450 HP. And you can see fucking professional Warchief. And this Witch Doc's healing, it's healing the Warchief, and it's using its effective HP, right? Cool, in a longer fight. Now we're going to do something like... This is obviously going to leak to no send on 3 often enough. It's totally proc reliant. Don't take this as an actual build, I just want to make a point, right? Now we're going to do something like this. So unfortunately there's no aura flag for this Witch Doc. So we can't see what the actual range is, but I can tell you it's not very long. So Warchief's going to walk up here. See, now the Witch Doc's going to walk up. Warchief is in range of the aura, which is good. You can see Witch Doc is tanking nothing. So this Witch Doc currently has 400 effective HP. Now it starts to tank. Right, that's a bit later than we want. You can see with the Warchief specifically, creeps go out of range of the slam, but that's not what we're testing here, right? The point we're trying to make is get that Witch Doc using its HP early, right? Sharing a little bit, because it doesn't actually have 400 HP, right? A unit with 400 HP and 0 health regen has 400 HP. But if this has taken damage, let's say the fight goes for 15 seconds. If this takes damage from second number 3 to second number 15, so 12 seconds of damage, right? Well, what's 12 by 5, right? It's 50 plus, it's 70, isn't it? No, 60. Fuck, maths is hard. So it has 460 HP, right? If it's taken damage, as long as it's more than like 5 DPS, which hopefully, if it takes damage for 12 seconds, it has 460 HP. With this positioning, it was only taking damage for maybe like 5 or 6 seconds, right? So let's say 6 seconds, half of that I think it's reasonable. It instead has a lot less, right? It has 430 HP. I'd rather have a unit with 460 HP, effective HP, than 430 effective HP. The other thing I'm going to say is the aura is actually not that long range, so be really careful. If you have a unit like LOD, always with LOD, Witch Doc goes here, right? The reason for that is I have seen one creep come down over here, and the Witch Doc hit it and stop, and the Infernal walk really far forwards, and then a creep spill, and the Witch Doc and Lord stay here, Infernal's far away, and the Infernal can actually walk out of range of the healing aura. Same can happen on level 4, right? So be really careful of that. And I guess we can show you right now on level 4. Once again, this is not going to hold level 4, this is just to make a point, right? So you want the Witch Doc nice and close to your melee units, very similar to the Highborn, right? Or the Mermaid, Highborn specifically. You can see Warchief in range, still in range, it's behaving nicely. And this war chief's going to sit in range like the whole time of the healing aura, right? Which is exactly what we want. You can see we're starting. This is probably like the outer limit of the range. Yep, that's the range right there. Whatever range that is, that's probably 400 range. I'm going to guess it's its attack range. Looks about like its attack range, honestly. Okay, healing aura 400 range. That's actually a nice little thing to know. And see if we put it something like this, and we're just going to watch how this goes in terms of healing aura. So we had like pretty much full uptime on it there. We ended up doing not too badly versus the pigs. See, now watch this moves up. Witch Doc's going to find this creep. So this is like uh-oh, because this Witch Doc's going to stay here. See, this War Chief moves up. It's going to move. So it moves up, it's going to be out of range. So lucky it moves sideways. If it moved up, it would have been out of range for like half its HP, and that's not okay, right? So, got to be a little bit careful with your melee units there, that they don't walk outside the range of the Witch Doc. But yeah, that pretty much says it all for Witch Doc, right? It's just about using the EHP of the healing. Same goes for the Highborn, right? Highborn, it's a little bit jankier because you don't want it wasting the shield either. So it's like, I want it to take damage, but I don't. This one, it's like, no, early on, I want it to take a little bit of damage. At some point, generally like level 5, it becomes just like a bit difficult to actually get it sharing early because it can just take too much damage and die. And that's not cool. But in general, first 3 levels, you want this unit to, you want to try and get this unit sharing a little bit of damage, just to increase its EHP, right? The longer it's tanking 5 DPS or greater, the more that this healing aura actually does on your lane as a whole, right? Because it's obviously affected by its own aura. But yeah, that'll about do it for all the tier 4s, in fact. So the ones I'm going to skip, Drunk Pirate, it's just kind of bad every level. Sorry, just got my notes up. Priest, it's actually like a legit unit, but it doesn't really matter where you build it, you just get a little bit of damage share. And it's a lot smarter with its heal now, so that's good. But it goes AFK on level 4, so that's awkward. Medicine Man, it's like same as Priest, but it's literally just worse. Outcast is just really bad. It one-shots 3, so it can be like an okay add there, but in general it's quite bad. Troll Fighter, once again, it's a range one-shot for 3, so you can use it for that, but you very rarely see it, and the placement is just at the back. The only thing I'll say about Troll Champion, if you build it for 8, you can build it in front because it has long range and doesn't walk forwards before it attacks, so it's actually a good damage share unit on level 8, because Troll Champion is fairly tanky. Troll Fighter is squishy as hell. Necro just goes at the back, but there's really, the only build you can do with Solar Necro is it needs Exac, and then you overbuild for 7, but otherwise you just use it as an ad for bigger units and you put it behind, and you never try and make it damage share, because if you try and make it damage share, then those little 100 HP skeletons they don't damage share, they just die, right? So you can't damage share with this unit. And last thing is Void Dragon or Obliteration Dragon. It's good on 5 and 7. You want to build it nice and close. Actually, maybe that's even worth talking about super quickly. Void Dragon, I suppose, just purely in terms of placement. So let's do... So we're going to have 2 setups. We're going to have this one. And then we're going to put it further forwards. So you'll be able to see is with this one, it'll look relatively similar, but we'll get better damage share with it in front. And chances are we'll get a better wrap around. The creeps will end up closer. We won't have... you can see there's a bigger split in these creeps, and we only hit a few creeps with the AoE there. And if we hit a creep, say here with the AoE, we'd only hit half of them, because there's that gap between the Obli and the War Chief. But if we build it here, here instead, if we build it here instead, when the creeps wrap around, there'll be less of a gap between the Obliteration and the War Chief. And that's what we want, right? Because that will make more use of the AoE. So you can see the creeps are more clogged now because everything's closer. And then all the creeps that start to flank, they're closer together because your front unit and your obliteration dragon are closer together, which is perfect, right? That's what we want because then we get the most out of that AoE. And fucking well done, dragon. Oh boy. Well done. Use that AoE shot on one creep. The point still stands. You'd build this witch dot closer as well if you had this set up and don't have this set up. But yeah, okay, Obliteration Dragon is the last one quickly. Just make sure you build it nice and close to your front line so it AoEs the most number of creeps on these low collision melee levels, 5 and 7, and those are the 2 levels where it's good. Low collision, light armor, melee. It's good times for Obliteration Dragon. So it's got 3 levels where it's good, 5, 7, and 21. Every other level it's garbage. It's actually kind of good on level 2 and 3, but yeah, you don't really like it there. Anyway, that'll conclude this one. So cheers for watching. Like, subscribe, all of that. Stay tuned for the tier 5s that'll come out in the next week or 2. And yeah, I'll catch you in the next one.